Hi, I'm Caryn, and I will be reading pages 31 through 40, although I'm going to begin at the bottom paragraph of page 30. Consider the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon theory. We can take a collected amount of instances and relative points, people, across time and connect the degrees to them with the information and abilities we currently have. With more time, the events of those digits existent within any size of funk influence is going to get closer and or farther connectedly apart, and how y across time, Kevin Bacon, a collection of atoms and or even an unknown description of funk, gathered collectively at a points in time with the help of technologies created from itself, we can explain or disprove each other the point of x, y, z, and w by a few clicks of a button or less. So far to me, and now perhaps us, why and how it got there and the clearer explanations of connections are measurably and collectively closer, and we continue expanding our records on the experiences of the past as we become further futures, presents, pasts into across infinity. To my observation so far, for everything, all forms of practice, function, and execution don't exactly or necessarily make perfect, but they do observably form patterns of some sort of eventual habit or instinct, and the habitats for those habits, instincts to exist in. We are perhaps the theoretical monkeys with the typewriters, and now given enough time, we have not only written Shakespeare's collected works, but all of the written history, and are somehow understanding what I'm saying now, just as you seemingly are, and using all of this collected information, experience, to do whatever we are able, whether it leads to more Shakespeare or every version of Shakespeare and what exists beyond Shakespeare, a fraction of all that is now prospectively happening, both predictably with chance and also not. A room of monkeys seemingly haven't written any books yet, at least not in a language we recognize, but somehow the chances are statistically there are possibly closer to happening than ever before, and if I put a typewriter in a room with a group of animals or things, that those events would become an observable study and historical data for an exponential amount of information, even if subjectively considered wasting time, as the information is still there to be referenced by the funk. And since time is considerably relative and or beyond, that event could happen either my tomorrow or your yesterday, or anything between or outside our time and or space, and we can now more functionally calculate and share what we've learned so far, whenever these things happen or attempt to do so or not. In order to view a 2D or 3D object, you need to be able to observe it from 4D or above, and that is questionably time or the idea of it. Say watching a YouTube video or reading a book as being within the 4D. Currently, we are seemingly unable to access a deeper understanding of its calculations and data needed to view how to observe and or translate all the steps it took from your birth to the end of said book video, and where and when it all happened and how to show it to yourself, ourself, and or others more successfully. I propose it is getting rapidly closer as well as it is already here, there. We ourselves cannot currently physically go back in time, but we can do variations of it. You can remember the past or attempt to do so and find ways to look back into history. Tomorrow, if someone successfully attempts to put a typewriter in front of itself or anything and can successfully record that information, eventually we can recall that past event or attempt to analyze its present and future as it happens and is created. It is also possibly that you can go so far into the future that all this eventually happens again. February 27, 2024. ChatGPT's 4's context window was once 8,192 tokens or a few pages of a book, meaning it would only remember and be able to reference very little of what had just processed or been discussing. A few months later, GPT-4 Turbo had a context window of 128,000 tokens, which meant it could remember and discuss any point of an entire book with you. Just last week, Google released that their DeepMind Gemini 1.5 now has a context window of 1 to 10 million tokens. Eventually, if given the information, computers, technology will be able to recall our entire lives and show, discuss, pinpoint any moment information in history. For reference, DeepMind Gemini 1.5, an AI that remembers 2-minute papers, a YouTube video, compared to the context window of the funk. Links to videos will be in a description. If you're reading this, you likely can't see me or I you in our physical presences right now unless I happen to be near you or vice versa. But you could imagine it, and the events surrounding those and these thoughts and creations are inspiring this and that, or isn't, and could lead to its happening or not, and the next happenings or not. Repeat, rearrange, repeat, retry, repeat, etc. And the funk both does and doesn't ever get old because it is able to store and reuse its information and repair, destroy, refresh itself, or learn how to access and reaccess all information to somehow or someday apply, reapply itself into an action series of new events, even if it is just the beginning or the moment before things have even begun. There will be infinite ends and beginnings to the string chain of loops of dimensions of time, and everything that comes or doesn't come of from it is relative to this information in some distant, direct, and interconnected way. Saturday, December 7th, 2019, returning to answering questions from the internet. Number 238834444, 238833342 OP. Can an almighty being create a mountain it can't lift? And if he can't, is it still almighty? Yes, the intention of an almighty being alone is enough to create three realities. One where it made a mountain it can lift, one where it created a mountain it can't lift, and one where the mountain was never created at all. The almighty can't interfere with the almighty without compromising its status. It needs images of itself that lack that quality to interact with one's other self. We are just dialogue, words, and ultimately fleeting thoughts pondering a higher existence. Maybe that helps you. Number 238834460, 238834444. 100%, or whatever the real agreeable statistic is. I say 100% because it makes a lot of sense as to what you're saying. Really, I understand to my own degree whatever actual percentage that may be or become. You have now relayed and attributed that information into the idea and back to it, and you have expanded from these influences. There are omnipotentially, infinitely more real amounts than three realities unless I am mistaken or misunderstanding. Over time and trial and error, there are all the realities within those realities that you stated as well. One where the mountain is green, one where the mountain is silent, one where the mountain can lift itself, and so on and so forth. And we are in the reality that is currently at this moment. Thank you for your response. March 18th, 2023. Additionally, all three or more of those realities are part of the same funk, multiverses within an omniverse. As further response to this, an almighty being would absolutely be able to create a mountain it could not lift at the time of being challenged or requested. But then if it ever wanted or needed to lift the unliftable mountain, it would be able to do so or make it so as it is an almighty being or is in the progress of becoming. Within and beyond infinity, 0% is still possible or very likely. We understand that in our reality there is a 0% chance of finding a blue giraffe with wings, that is, until a blue giraffe with wings is found or created. In one moment, the almighty being has a 0% chance of lifting the mountain until it decides it can or it does. This can repeat ad infinitum. March 2nd, 2024. As God, my Father, says, it is the only way it is until we discover the new way it is. And then that is the way it is until we discover the new way it is, and so it goes until the world is no longer flat, electricity lights the night, and shoes are no longer tied with ribbons. Emma Stone is Bella Baxter in Poor Things. August 13th, 2024. Even the almightiest of beings still exists within an even almightier funk. It seems some things that I and others have observed to be used to discredit information or dismiss, get rid of, or not count, are actually in a way very important to the decisions and/or events after all. Ignoring unrevealed information by dismissing the further meanings behind the why not is in a way an action that leaves more issues than constructively adds to development, even though ignorance and/or dismissals are still additional developments of happenings. Not everything is symmetrical or has to be. All perspectives and the occurrences of these perspectives are extremely important, individual, and collective, and dismissing abstract thought or experience because it is not as understandable or clean as symmetry, resonance, and/or is objectively more challenging to interpret, translate, is what becomes observably less constructive and could be experienced construed as harmful, neglective, and/or less progressive towards the funk and constructive communication, interaction with the funk and each other. Consider bias, racism, prejudice, discrimination, and/or other things around that nature. Actions, decisions, etc., that arise from those beliefs or principles are more inspired by the group or individual to make a hurtful choice against someone or something else, and for some reason they currently understand their ideas, beliefs to be the best choice for themselves. In these areas, the idea of yes and could be harmful or destructive, which is why it is important to learn how to understand the importances of who, what, when, where, why, and how to appropriately less yes and if this, then what. So how do we reach further understanding together of what is and is not hurtful, harmful, or destructive, and how we together can reach subjective, objective progression? What if investigating 2 plus 2 equals 5 and the meanings behind the equation solution, or how to actually make it possible or prove how it is impossible, is more important than dismissing it, or giving in to some sort of feeling that extracts you from the next possible outcome until someone or something else eventually makes or causes it to happen? Wouldn't you want to be the person who could do that? Why aren't you? Say you or whoever indeed discovered an answer, but no one would even consider hearing how or why. How would that affect you? They, I, us, information, knowledge, everything, and/or funk. What if yellow plus shape equals banana is a slang term, and I just offended every one of you? And if so, I deeply apologize. It was in an effort of further understanding. How would we ever know further unless we were or are to experience and learn from those scenarios, whether fact or fiction, real and/or imaginary? If you were someone who had given up and had not read this far, then you would exist in the relative directly not or dismissed category of these currently suggested hypotheses. But if you are still reading this and attempting to understand, then these examples and proposals are continuing to expand directly through and beyond you and I until further discussed or not, and/or proven correct or not. And again, I or you or time, space, funk are able to do these things in our current realities where everything once was not as achievable before this degree. Again, I am genuinely sorry about the banana thing. I hope you can please choose to forgive me and keep investing in our current efforts to learn. Heart emoji. I think about the semiotics of a heart. There are now a universal, though mostly human, pattern and symbol of understanding, love, or liking something to a degree and assists you and I in further understanding connection. Hearts are everywhere, anywhere, and sometimes nowhere. April 25th, 2012, I started a project called Drawbook, which you currently now do or did not know about, www.drawbook.net. And it has so many hearts in it and is full of so much love and more. Less than 3. And currently, as I write this, I am on book 59, and hearts are by far one of the most drawn things. It is currently over 13,000 original works of art produced by you, myself, and random interconnected chance events with others. And as you have now or eventually will witness, there are a lot of hearts everywhere. Seemingly a reminder for you and us of the love from the funk, as well as every recognizable and approachable desire to connect with something that seems to lean toward more pleasurable, connecting and/or constructive for us within the funk. Loving the moments of being loved as what we want to be loved and as the abilities to share love. Love is everywhere, sometimes more, sometimes less, but you'll find even more of it while seeking and spreading it than when you aren't. March 2nd, 2024, here's some love for Drawbook. Cron.com, Culture Arts. Negative or bad things often get more overall attention than positive or good. If something objectively bad happens, many will observe, judge, and share negative opinions quite quickly before they investigate deeper into what is absolutely good or bad about the occasion. By sharing any of those reflecting negative or positive ideas into thought or reality, they immediately become influential to others, and that drama becomes quantumly, historically recorded as for further data calculation of the overall events as they continue. Does that mean negative is greater than positive? Both, sometimes yes and sometimes no. Negativity, for some reason, is often more dramatically noteworthy and observably more prominent by experience. But it is still, as we understand at this current time, and they may be different for you, a negative integer, which is still scientifically less than more, but can, as history has shown, in some ways and times be measured and translated much more than positive events. In terms of improv, yes and is greater than a no or denial, but no but can be and is still often a part of yes and. So again, yes and is still seemingly at an advantage of positive success, even when experiencing negation or denials, and if I had to express it as potential math equation, I suggest that positive yin reaches above or greater than 50% or 0%, and negative yang is possibly the extension below or less than 50% or 0%, in whatever way possible, and they continuously reach into and out of each other, forever attempting to be 51%, 49%, 1%, negative 1%, or more less. Taking from the knowledge I have gained so far, I see the importance of punctuation, especially the question mark, and I would like to share how I personally think Espanol to be so fantastic for deciding to establish the question or emotion first when asking it. For those who aren't aware, in Espanol, when a question begins, you already know it's a question, pero como, but how? Just like that. By expanding upon the end result, question mark, and putting it at the beginning of the equation as an upside down question mark, it becomes quickly understandable in a faster and a subjectively more convenient way of communication. Now you know it's a question before you've even read it. Additionally, I have seen examples in games and stories of doing something similar by putting the emotions first. Happy. I am so excited to share this information with you. Lovingly with anticipation. I can't wait to see what we come up with using this information. Questioningly, I wonder what we can do next. To continue, the faster or more positive, constructive, and more easily you are able to attempt to clearly explain an idea or statement to something else, the faster progressive, constructive thought and reaching further understanding becomes. But as an inverse, the negative or lesser than is also doing the same to what is above or below it. And like I said, it seems like the lesser than has a way of seemingly affecting or influencing individuals subjectively sometimes more than what we've seen the positive to do. Though again, negative is often understood to be deconstructive and positive as constructive, even though both can result in the other depending on the equation or situation. Mathematically, multiplying or dividing positive and negative is always going to result in a negative, but adding or subtracting positive to negative can result in either side. Multiplying or dividing positive and positive will always be positive, and negative to negative will also be positive. Adding negative to negative will always be negative. Adding positive to positive will always be positive. Subtracting negative from negative can be positive, and subtracting positive from positive can be negative. At some point, we will figure out how to translate the equations between the equations directly and or indirectly, and we are historically on the way to experiencing and eventually understanding those solutions. But also with any correct answer or solution, these equations and results can still be misinterpreted if you don't choose to understand them further or attempt to know them rather than to assume them. If you never learn what someone or something truly intended by, for example, putting an upside-down question mark in front of a question, you are in a way failing to understand the knowledge or translations of the funk and are subjectively, objectively freeloading during the greater progressions being created, proposed to you, around you, which isn't wrong, just debatably less constructive. Additionally, if you desire, you can choose to be dishonest. You can act a different role and convince and influence information in others with your acting and what you decide to do with each mask persona. But with our current social and technological connections, given enough time and study, I believe, if necessary, you or anyone, anything can or will eventually be seen or revealed to be acting, if so, and or you, our masks, personas to be identified. When given enough time, experience, and study, more patterns become observed enough for us to know, understand, guess when someone or something is acting or choosing to lie, knowingly or unknowingly, rather than honestly attempting to attribute to the more constructive paths of progression. So there is every variable between and beyond negative progression and progressive negation, and with time we understand each a bit more and find easier ways to explain, identify, or expose them or not. And each, all, again and again, could be something we don't yet understand or not able to be at this time or potentially any time. It could eventually be PAIHWRTEPU9BQFSDG PLUS PLUS MINUSLOL and ostensibly you don't quite understand what I'm proposing, but you have a closer idea because we are currently within our actions expanding directly and indirectly through results between nature and nurture, and the beyond to continue attempting to do so through these communications and experiences, anything that causes them to be and anything and everything else. Water. More on acting. The action and or act of acting can sometimes be very enjoyable, both in doing and observing, but only arguably if that acting is genuine and for entertainment or subjective greater positive progressive purpose. If that acting is disingenuous and or purposely decided or used to be dishonest or deceitful, as by a person, group, or thing, and then that action or acting now acts as a negative or destructive deconstructive purpose, and perhaps could be revealed over time to be a lie or misinterpreted as a lie or truth. Actors are playing what they have studied or believed to be reality into a simulated reality, but it is not a purely uninfluenced moment action, so it can also be found, observed to be sometimes be falsely constructed or portrayed through a perhaps unintentional positive or negative lie or simulation we can enjoy, accept, or not. From their actions comes the experience of someone attempting to portray their understanding of the past, present, future, and what we or they have experienced while also setting, relaying an example of history for the future, present, past. It is both a lie and genuine, and only the actor really knows the majority of the truth in their actions. So hopefully they are honest about what they are doing, but sometimes even they don't understand or realize the effects of their influences, whether honest or not, and or intentional or not. Unless they are transparent about their actions, you'll currently never know if they really are being honest or not, because you are not them unless you are eventually able to be, though by that point it will no longer be this current time, but the future, leaving you a very different amount of available options. Both you and the actor are a myriad of truths and lies with enough time and effort, or current truths and or lies can potentially be observed, accessed, questioned, or accused by the entirety of present or future humankind or beyond, perhaps even all of existence. Artists, composers, and musicians seemingly make art to be created and or not created, and then experienced or not to be experienced. Those who experience these creations or lack of creation view, gather, judge, and also create as well, but not to the full extent of artists, composers, musicians, and etc. experience. But they still have a lot to say about it all, regardless of education or experience toward the subject, which is an observation that also applies to artists, composers, musicians, etc. Creators can create or do and attribute to existence with any amount of influence and subjectively, objectively to a more enjoyable degree versus those who simply view and critique existence or art. Artists mostly create physically or in a way you can somehow react with and interpret. Composers are able to write and interpret information as sound in order to more clearly compose, and musicians learn from composers, artists, viewers, and themselves by both mimicry and then possibly advancing to composition, and the same can apply to the artist. However, it seems that the viewer's views, comments, judgments, and critiques are their instrument of choice or vocal paintbrushes, and are still their attribution and contribution to the artist, musician, composer, producer, engineer, and so forth, making them artists and creators in their own way. March 11th, 2024. Everyone and everything reacts to each other, creating this influential funk for everyone and everything to continue reacting to. Back to the internet. Number 2388-3466, Friday, December 6th, 2019, 1241, 2388-3454. This funk you have intuited has been described in many ways, such as flow or Whitehead, and other processists describe it as the rhythm of experiential discovery. For Bergson, calculus is more than just a handy metaphor, analogy, but rather he indeed aimed at framing an approach to the organicist world hypothesis that employs the calculus as its actual method of discovery, i.e., differentiation, and explanation, i.e., integration, and that every discovery is the inverse of an explanation and every explanation the derivative of a discovery. March 21st, 2024. These are all holons of funk realization's understanding that existed to cavernialistically branch us to where we currently are and are continuing. From the internet, www.religiononline.org article. The true method of discovery is like the flight of an airplane. It starts from the ground of a particular observation. It makes a flight in the thin air of imaginative generalization, and it again lands for renewed observation rendered acute by rational interpretation. Alfred North Whitehead. A YouTube video and Wikipedia. Alfred North Whitehead. And I'm proposing that you, I, Whitehead, Bergson, and everything are right and wrong over and over until once again it all makes further sense to you and I or everyone, or it doesn't until further notice or not. All of everything over an exponential amount of time, space, reality loops along a string chain of collected branches of observed or measurable, immeasurable length, and the moments of experience and data collection, storage, review of information, and understanding of it all that you and I in the past, present, future understand it to be, have been, and become. Whether you do or don't believe it, we will both individually perish with time, though also exist within the future as influential effects toward it, even though you and I will no longer as physical beings be here or there, but will exist as a part of the everything leading up to and after, whether as particles, waves, influence, and or beyond. The funk is always at times here, there, everywhere, everything, and also nothing, and it does and does not provide for us and or take from us. As of this moment, we cannot provably connect to it as easily as you and I are doing with each other, but the observable patterns of us doing so are forever more increasingly arising as we continue to explore, experience, expand, etc., even though you may understand or interpret it as something different. We are beetles pleading or trying to survive with and or against birds, and we are also the birds making the same arguments to the beetles. Little fish to bigger fish, matter versus time and space. Over time, one or more will always conquer, collaborate, or be in harmony with one another, either by choice or by chance. It is the way we understand many, but not all, natures to be. August 14th, 2024, Thesis, Antithesis, Synthesis. In our current times, we have records that many individuals, groups achieve success within our time or not, ranging from great to small and or none. We also experience a significant amount of loss or failures. To our knowledge of current history, some say Mozart died poor and was buried in a pauper's grave, though this is also debated. Whereas, were he alive now or currently had this level of present and or past success during his life, his music and fame would potentially have been able to keep him alive and contributing for a longer period of time toward the funk. But in our reality, we know it not to be so, unless you are eventually able to prove to me, us, otherwise. Some also argue that to not be the case. What is true and how do we know? What even is success or failure? Around this, our current time, 2019, a banana duct taped to a wall sold for $120,000. What is more successful, Mozart or Maurizio Catalan's Comedian? Both are in a way successful and gaining more and more views, but what will in the end have the most influence and or prominent effect on with the funk, and took a subjectively more time, effort, and experience to do so, while also being subjective or able to be described as similar. One or several of many and all of these answers are correct, and a source points of that collective understanding is here, there, and everywhere within and beyond the funk. And whatever you believe contributes to whatever you believe and expands with everything forever. However, if you were to ask someone whether they knew Amadeus Mozart or Maurizio Catalan, it is likely they're going to recognize Mozart over Banana Tape Wall Guy. So, in my opinion, Mozart wins this round, but that doesn't mean Catalan failed or is a failure. Saturday, December 7th, 2019, continued. Wikipedia article about a Fibonacci number. Consider the Fibonacci sequence and why it is so prevalent in the nature of the funk around within us. Each iteration continues to grow within, without, and beyond itself. Imagine graphing this sequence. You create an original first point where the sequence to us is so seemingly starts, and you begin to spiral out in opposing directions from the starting point. The spiral appears to be going in a circle around this point, and so far in our present, we are unable to calculate the endpoints in time, besides those we create ourselves. Say you are now on the fifth sequence of the spiral you started. Considering where you started that original point in time, or that official beginning point you set down on paper or on your computer, is no longer at that original location in space-time. You can observe the spiral that you have created, and it is observably in front of you, seemingly a perfect ratio of going round and round, but if you extend this ratio to the point of cavernal time and space where it originally began in the universe funk, and attempt to track and graph it through its spine from then to now, it becomes a potentially 4D graph extended image. Using our data within each of our individual group experiences and branching points adds to the entire selfless, selfish, individual group experience of the funk. That starting point of the sequence is now a past point location in time and space where you and the Earth were, let's say, 5 minutes ago, which is at least hundreds or thousands of miles away. Even though the graph is seemingly still in front of you, the true beginning of your Fibonacci sequence is at a previous point in your hour and its collective spine, or the individual timeline, branching from a starting point of space within its Carvanial sequences across time. The entire sequence becomes a much weirder and more random-looking shape, but it is still in essence a similar, same ratio. The graph is just much more complicated and different after being extended into another dimension. It extends out like a spiral, expanding like a cone, and then moving through space-time. Imagine the spiral you started to now be going from your starting point and expanding towards like a cone, extending closer to you with each additional extension, now in the third dimension rather than in the second dimensionally graphed Fibonacci sequence you originally drew or imagined. The spiral cone you exist in and know and understand started at a much smaller point and spirals outward and begins to make a cone-like shape or funnel. As your iterations expand, so do the dimensions of your sequences and cones. Additionally, another circle-like cone extends away from the opposite side of your starting point, becoming larger and larger and farther away. March 22nd, 2024. And when you graph these cones through fourth-dimensional space-time from one point to another, it becomes an entirely different shape that would be difficult or conceivably impossible for me to describe to you, though perhaps you can still attempt to imagine it. Carvinalistic frames of overlapping and extending comes from here to there. Wikipedia article spine. Picture an ice cream cone. The bottom of the cone is closed. You scoop the ice cream into the top of the cone, and that cone holds your ice cream. You cannot currently, in our reality, put the scoop of ice cream through the bottom point of the cone. It is not big enough, as it is the smallest point, and it is used to support the rest of the cone, so it can then hold the ice cream, much like the past is constructed to support to the present and future. But if you were theoretically able to calculate not only the start of the cone, but were able to witness or comprehend the cone to also extend backward into the past, like the shape of an hourglass, you begin to graph the time and existence leading up to the cone and beyond. Your individual superpositional starting point in time of your branch of sequences within the funk also extends as a string chain of branches, possible loops in all directions before and after your existence, and eventually both larger sides of the hourglass connect through the string chain of branches loops and continues extending seemingly forever, while also beginning again or perhaps even stopping, but at different superpositional points of connection in time and space. And each point in that sequence within our experienced funk branches is now, with technology, more easily calculable, recordable, and relatable, and we are potentially able to draw a connecting line from one point in fourth dimension or even funk time and space to another. As I said before, the starting point of your superpositional Carvanial sequence, branching out in all directions and in each and every moment in time, someone or something else's 4D-like and beyond metaphorical hourglass spine begins and expands, just as yours does, while having already expanded from the past. And all that data is becoming easier to store and equate, and it goes around and round, always moving forward from the backwards into time and space. March 22nd, 2024. And when you and or the ice cream cone are gone, the spinal branches of each may possibly be at their individual endpoints of physical form, but the influence of from their beings or soul continues expanding with every remaining expanding point, spine, influence, funk, etc. forever. Why doesn't this data make more sense to me, us, you ask? If all these patterns of knowledge and experience are here and there and are now observable and more easily shared and understandable, or if not, now increasingly more accessible to that understanding or achieving, then why am I or we still confused about it? This is a part of learning. March 23rd, 2024. Imagine buying a book or a video game and right after you started it, you were able to instantly reach the end and finish it. Would that be enjoyable? Compressing the entire story and emotional journey one would hope to experience, what would you learn, retain from that point? Or if you watched it only from the first episode of a series and then the last episode, you could only assume what happened in between. I think that is why it is important that we must experience all of reality and beyond as funk so that we can know and understand what funk was. The feelings that you are currently experiencing and others are understanding to be are parts confusion, understanding, and more, and all of your instinctual feelings are results of your individual internal selfishness, gathered, challenged, and expanded from your nurturing and nurturing external selflessness. You're our inner and outer influences and beyond. It is important to be selfish to a manageable degree in order for our individual branches of time, experience and understanding and data collection to exist and continue attempting to exist. Each of our selfishnesses guides us, and in some ways it sometimes distracts us from selflessness, while also being influenced by and sometimes leading us to selflessness. And it is when those points meet that two or more selfish identities are able to connect and expand off each other or not. Consider two parallel lines that never meet. It is in their selfish natures to keep expanding in both directions and to continue expanding and taking up the space they each exist in. And as they get longer and longer, they become larger parallel lines, but they are also still just two similar parallel lines that never touch or meet or perhaps even know of each other's existence. Now, say these lines are currently parallel, but also expanding selflessly inside and out of themselves in every direction of points and space, eventually crossing each other outside and inside of their selfish paths. Their selfish and selfless interactions paint a much larger picture than just those two lines that never met. Now picture these parallel lines as individual people. They can, with choice or not, move forwards, backwards, sideways, diagonally, etc., communicate with each other or not, know of each other or not, and their points of existence are able to interact at an infinite amount of points across time and space. Okay, let's get into this. First of all, it is a very good idea to read this, hear it out loud. Might not be able to understand or take away from this, but I actually do a lot of voice acting. And I was also a commercial script writer at one point. And there were a lot of times when I was given something to read that was not read out loud. And once the person wrote it, heard it out loud, they made a lot of changes. You really do need to hear the written word spoken out loud, even if it may never be spoken out loud, because a lot of ideas do gel that way. So this is a very good thing to be doing. Second, it's very dense. With it being a treatise, I guess it could be dense like a textbook. Not knowing what it was going into it, it took me a minute to find the voice, find the cadence, because I had no description of what I was taking on. Very interesting subject, by the way. My two biggest takeaways, run-on sentences. I counted several that went on to 5 or 6 lines. And when you try to make so many points in one sentence, you lose track of what was being addressed, what was being said in the very beginning. Especially when you end up using a lot of punctuation, a lot of parentheses. And also, for the eye, it's easier to break down points and ideas in smaller paragraphs. So that's something to keep in mind. But the run-on sentences were problematic. The ideas need to be condensed. And ironically, I found the sentences were shorter when you were talking about math. So there may be a connection there. And another thing, um, the slashes, dashes, several, starting on page 31, futures, past, pasts, into, across infinity. Another on page 36, objectively, subjectively. On 38, explore, experience, expand. On page 40, a string, chain of branches, possible loops. It could be that you're still working on this and these are placeholders for the ideas you're trying to convey. But if you intend to actually keep this, um, that's it's too much. It's too broad. It's too broad of an idea. And there were some passages where I was just doing nothing but reading if and or but, I, you, him, the funk. You There either needs a different way to express this, or you need to go ahead and choose your voice and decide on which voice you are using for this. But other than that, very interesting reading. I liked the points, and I think you have something good here. Good luck.